April 3rd, 1974. 13 states. More tornadoes touched down in one day than America had ever recorded. A record that would stand for 37 years. I saw the roofs of houses fling through the air. In a matter of seconds, the tornado was over us. We could not breathe, swallow, nothing, but it comes back. A school bus thrown into a stranger's garage. Whole towns swept down to the bare slab. 7 of the most violent tornadoes ever measured were already forming. To understand the day, we have to go back to a quiet, ordinary morning. The Ohio and Tennessee valleys know spring storms the way some places know snow. People here grow up with the watches and the warnings. They learn to read a green sky. They do not panic at a dark afternoon, because dark afternoons come every year. The worst many of them could remember was water, not wind. In Brandenburg, Kentucky, the old benchmark for disaster was the Ohio River flood of 1937, when the river rose and took the low ground and people rebuilt on higher footing. That was the measure. That was as bad as it got. April 3rd was not supposed to break that measure. It opened mild and almost gentle. One survivor in Xenia, Ohio, remembered it as a beautiful, beautiful morning. The kind of picture postcard spring day that makes you forget the season has another face. The night before, Hank Aaron had tied Babe Ruth's home run record, and the country was talking about baseball. The Sting had just swept the Oscars. The president was buried in Watergate. It was an ordinary week in an ordinary spring. But something had been building since the day before. On April 2nd, a low-pressure system formed on the dry side of the Rocky Mountains and began to crawl east. A cold front pressed down out of Canada. Warm, wet air climbed up from the Gulf, and high above all of it ran a jet stream clocked at 140 knots, a river of wind waiting for the two air masses to meet. They met over the heartland. The first tornado touched down around 9:30 that morning in Indiana. It was small. It was a warning no one could read yet. That morning, touchdown was nothing. A brief spin in a field. By early afternoon, the sky over Indiana and Illinois had gone wrong in a way the radar of the day could barely describe. 2:20 in the afternoon. Near DePaul, Indiana, the first monster of the day drops out of the cloud and grows into an F5, the highest rating that exists. 6 people die before it lifts. It is the first of 7 that will earn that rating before the night is over. But this was only the prelude. Across Indiana, a tornado tracks the ground for more than 100 miles, tearing through Monticello, killing 19, leaving a scar you could follow on a map from one county to the next. The storms are moving fast now, 50, 60, 65 miles per hour, faster than you can drive away from on a back road. And the map kept lighting up. 4 o'clock. Southwest of Xenia, Ohio, a funnel forms near Bellbrook. A weatherman named Gil Whitney at the Dayton television station has been watching a hook shape curl on his radar, and he goes on the air and tells everyone in its path to take cover. Minutes. That is the warning. Minutes. You are in Xenia. School let out hours ago. The high school is nearly empty, except for a handful of students rehearsing a play on the auditorium stage. Outside, the thing coming toward town does not look like the tornadoes in the pictures. It looks like 2 funnels braided together, splitting apart, slamming back into one. In a matter of seconds, the tornado was over us. 4:40 in the afternoon. The tornado hits central Xenia at F5 strength, half a mile wide. It flattens the Windsor Park and Arrowhead neighborhood so completely that whole rows of brick houses are swept down to nothing, the debris combed out into the fields beyond. It is shown live on television. Thousands of people watch it happen. A sound we haven't heard before. Inside the high school, the students on the stage run for the main hallway and press themselves against the walls. Seconds later, a school bus is dropped onto the stage where they had just been standing. The afternoon was not the worst of it, because at almost the same hour, 2 states away, a wall of cloud nearly half a mile wide is bearing down on Brandenburg, Kentucky, a small town on the bank of the Ohio River. The National Weather Service gets a warning out. 15 minutes later, the tornado is in the town. It does not look like a funnel. It is too wide for that. People who saw it describe a solid black wall. It was a wall of black. A little after 4 o'clock, Brandenburg time, the F5 tears straight through downtown. 18 people die on a single street. 18. The courthouse comes down. City Hall comes down. A newspaper delivery man crawls under the dashboard of his pickup and prays while the wind throws the truck around him. I saw the roofs of houses fling through the air, and it was happening everywhere at once. This is the part that has no comparison, before or since. At one point in the afternoon, as many as 15 separate tornadoes are on the ground at the same time. Forecasters with 1950s equipment, no Doppler radar, no cell phones, no sirens in most towns, are trying to track a disaster unfolding in 13 states at once. Warnings travel the only way they can. Neighbor calling neighbor. It's coming. Get down. In a library in Xenia, a woman named Billy Cummings hears a sound start like a swarm of bees and rise into a roar. She herds everyone into the basement, finds 2 little girls in the reading room who have no idea what is happening, and pulls them down the stairs. Then the sun went down, and it kept coming. Most disasters end at nightfall. This one did not. As the light failed over the Ohio Valley, a new band of storms was firing across Alabama, and these would be among the most violent of all. In the evening, in Limestone County, Alabama, the small town of Tanner is hit by an F5 tornado. Homes are not damaged. They are gone, swept off their slabs, the largest recognizable piece of one house reported as a set of bed springs. Rescuers move into the wreckage in the dark to look for the living. About half an hour later, a second F5 tornado comes through Tanner along nearly the same path. It strikes while the rescuers are still in the rubble of the first. Read that again. The same small community, hit twice by the worst tornadoes the scale can measure, inside an hour. The second blow landing on the people who came to help. And the most violent one had not yet formed. 8:25 that night. Near the line between Mississippi and Alabama, a tornado forms in the dark and begins to move northeast, gaining speed and size as it goes. By the time it reaches the town of Gwinn, Alabama, it is an F5, and it is something the scientists who study these storms have almost no language for. Slow down here, because this is the worst of it. In Gwinn, the tornado does not just destroy houses, it removes them. Entire homes are lifted off their foundations and scattered across open fields. The brick businesses downtown are gone. 2 churches are gone. City Hall is gone. The mobile home plant on the edge of town is the first thing the storm erases. In some places, even the foundations are torn loose from the ground. Ted Fujita, the scientist whose name is on the scale used to rate every tornado in America, would later call the Gwinn tornado the most intense he ever surveyed in his life. A Weather Service surveyor walked the wreckage afterward and reached for the only words that fit. It was just like the ground had been swept clean. More than 20 people in Gwinn did not survive the night. And then, near the Tennessee River, the storms finally began to weaken. By morning, no one yet knew how many were gone. The counting would take days. When it was finally over, after 18 hours of nearly continuous tornadoes, The numbers told a story almost too large to hold. 148 tornadoes across 13 states, with one more across the border in Ontario, Canada. More than 6,000 people injured. Over 15,000 homes, businesses, and farm buildings destroyed, and another 17,000 damaged. Around $600 million in damage in 1974 money. A combined path of destruction more than 2,600 miles long, as if one wound had been dragged from the Gulf Coast to the Great Lakes. And 7 F5 tornadoes in a single day, the most ever recorded, a record that still stands. Roughly 335 people were dead, but a number that size goes numb in the mouth. It is too big to feel. A judge in Xenia who lived through it did not talk about the count. He talked about the faces, thousands of people standing in the wreckage of their town with the same blank look. Clinical shock on their face. In Brandenburg, in the strange grammar of what these storms can do, surveyors found a curtain rod driven so deep into the trunk of a tree that it stood there like a spear. Behind every one of those numbers was a name. These are a few of them. Lisa Taylor DeVond was 15 years old, a 10th grader at Xenia High School, and she was on her way to track practice when the sky turned. She saw the funnel split into two and whip back together with lightning coming out of it. A man she did not know grabbed her and pulled her into a store, and they huddled under a counter while the building came apart over them. Everybody says it sounds like a freight train. I didn't hear a freight train. 50 years later, she said she still remembers every detail. A few streets away, on Trumbull Street, David and Sandra Graham gathered their 4 children as the tornado came and took them to the corner of their basement. The force of the storm sheared the top off the 2-story house next door and dropped it onto their home. 3 of the Graham children did not survive. Sherry was 4. Billy was 6. David was 8. 10 years afterward, their father told a reporter that he did not dwell on the past. And then he said one more thing. But it comes back. In Brandenburg, a 25-year-old newspaper delivery man and part-time minister named Tom Bridge pulled his truck behind a building and crawled under the dashboard as the F5 came through. He lived. The images did not leave him. Those images you never get out of your mind. South of Brandenburg, a 10-year-old named Shelley Trent stepped off her school bus at 3:35 that afternoon. She told her mother she had a feeling of terror she could not explain, and the family drove to a relative's basement and survived. The bus driver who had just dropped her off was blown off the road and into a field minutes later. That is the thing about the school buses. In Xenia, the high school had emptied 2 hours before the tornado hit. If the storm had come earlier, with 2,000 children inside, the day would have a different name. The bus that landed on the stage landed on an empty stage. The Graham children were not at school. They were home, in the one place that was supposed to be safe. In a library basement across town, Billy Cummings waited out the roar with the people she had pulled to safety. When she wrote down what it felt like, she did not reach for weather words. It seemed the whole world had been broken by an angry child having a temper tantrum. Xenia had no tornado sirens on April 3, 1974. After that day, it built 10 of them. The country did the same on a larger scale. The disaster forced a complete rebuilding of how America watches the sky, the Doppler radar, the alert that now reaches your television and your phone, the modern system that exists because the old one failed 335 people in a single afternoon. Xenia rebuilt. A man named Dutail Ward planted a hand-painted sign in the slab where his house had stood, promising his family would return. Bumper stickers appeared around town that said only, "Xenia lives." The clock tower gong rang again, and somewhere in the records of that day, there is still a photograph of a yellow school bus thrown into a stranger's garage on an afternoon that began like any other. It began like any other.